if you're a big old truck nerd and you want to watch some guy rant about his favorite engine, then great. And if not, well, get out now because here it comes. All right. First off, we're talking about the new 6.8 from 2023, not the V10 version. The 6.8 is nicknamed the Minizilla and has a 7.5% shorter stroke than its big brother, Godzilla. I'm going to go into some details about the actual differences between the engines a little later. But if not for the Godzilla, the 6.8 would be the largest displacement gas engine on the market. It's a 415 cubic inch, naturally aspirated, old school pushrod iron block V8. It isn't bound to CAFE standards like the half tons. The government hits the manufacturers with big penalties if engines don't meet efficiency standards. This doesn't apply to any of the HD gas engines. In fact, it's pretty much the only category left that the government hasn't had its sweet way with. It still uses regular weight oil. There's no cylinder deactivation, no turbos, no low tension oil rings, no auto start stop. 7.3 and the 6.8 are some of the last engines that are built to be both durable and easy to work on. They're actually designed to be easily worked on. Imagine that. The 6.8 is the base drivetrain for most F-250 and F-350 trims at the moment. And Ford went way out of their way to downplay it, and I'm going to make that case as well. But let's start with the whole cast crank thing. So I've seen online and on YouTube that the 6.8 has a cast crank and the 7.3 has a forged crank. And of course, a forged crank is much stronger than a cast crank. So it was a way of saying that the 7.3 had stronger internals. And I was wondering where that came from. And the more I dug, the more interesting I found it. So here you see the announcement marketing for the 6.8. This is when they first announced it. They need a base engine, which doesn't steal the thunder from the premium one. But ideally, that one shares as many parts as possible with the premium version. So, it simplifies supply and keeps the cost down. So in order to charge premium, you need to give people a reason why it's worth it. An 8% power difference, while not nothing, doesn't exactly scream, take my money. So it's interesting to me that they announced the 6.8 with the cast crank. Subtle, but effective. Ford isn't going to lose many customers over a cast crank and a base engine, but it also adds to the argument that 7.3 with this fancy forged crank is what you're getting for that extra money. So they put out that one piece of marketing and the forum started picking up on that subtle difference. And then, of course, AI started picking up on it. DeepSeek, Grok, even the new ChatGPT often will tell you that it's a cast crank. So I'm going to make a case that that was all a clever ruse, and that not only that, they played with the capability ratings to make an even bigger gap. Then after that, we'll go over some numbers. Okay, Exhibit A. This is Ford component sales marketing material talking about the 6.8 forged crankshaft. Exhibit B. So in September of 2022, in Louisville, Kentucky, Ford unveiled the 6.8. And here's a picture from the event. There it is on the stand there. Now, if you look at the base way down at the bottom, here, I'll zoom and rotate and look, forged crankshaft. Actually, here's a nicer view of the pedestal. Forged crankshaft. Exhibit C. So I called and talked to someone at Ford Performance. The dealer service manual for the 6.8 says that it's a forged crank. So look, here's my closing argument. I could only find one piece of literature that Ford has ever put out that calls it a cast crank, and it was the very first thing they put out. And whether on accident or on purpose, it just happens to be what forums and AI ingested, and whoopsie doodles, the 7.3 looks like a much more attractive upgrade. But we're not done. We need to talk about the tow rating leap for the 7.3. So I'm going to compare two pretty similarly configured F-250s. They're not exact, but they're close enough. In fact, here they are. You can pause and compare them if you want to. The 6.8 is on the left, the 7.3 is on the right. Both are STX packages. And if you notice, the 6.8 on the left has the higher gross vehicle weight rating package and also the payload package. And the 7.3 doesn't have either of those. So remember that in a minute. But everything else is the same. Same block, same head, same cooling, same transmission, unless you get the trimmer. Same differential, same suspension, except for the payload package. Same brakes. In fact, the brakes are shared across the entire Super Duty line. I was interested to see that. So if you have an F-250 with the 6.8, You have the exact same braking system as a F350 high output power stroke dually. Same pads, rotors, calipers, master cylinder, everything. I actually cross-referenced the brake system across all Super Duty trucks. So the F250 6.8 and F250 7.3 are almost the same truck. The 6.8 F250 just makes 8% less power than the 7.3. So then why does the 7.3 have a 20% higher tow rating? The 6.8 is rated to tow almost 3,000 pounds less than the 7.3. And look, the max tongue load on the 6.8 is also 20% lower than the 7.3. But remember, the 6.8 has the payload package and the higher gross vehicle weight rating. So what's going on there? Here's the thing: Ford gets its SAE tow rating by passing tests, like the Davis Dam, and they give the declared gross combined vehicle weight rating. Declared, in other words, they can say whatever they want as long as they can defend it. So I think it's pretty clear to me that they gave a gross combined vehicle weight rating that was appropriate for the 7.3, but underrated the 6.8. The difference between the 6.8 and the 7.3 isn't enough to justify a 20% boost with the 7.3. They don't want the 6.8 to steal thunder, and by thunder, I mean money, from the 7.3, so they declared artificially low tow rating in order to build, kind of like a regulatory case for paying extra for the 7.3, because we wouldn't want to be overweight, would we? So the parts difference between the two engines is really just the crank, connecting rods, and pistons. Everything else is the same. These engines cost almost the same for Ford to produce. So can you see what they did there? I mean, it's pretty brilliant marketing, really. You get whispers going that the 6.8 contains inferior internals and, kneecap its towing. And this drives people to spend extra money for a relatively small difference and without any cost at all to Ford. And that may be worth it. But you can see how they use marketing and tow ratings to drive people into that bucket. So yeah, no shade on the 7.3. I'm just saying the 6.8 is very likely much more capable than what it's rated for. And the difference is probably a little bit closer than marketing would want you to believe. I'm confident you could max out the 6.8 and still have a load of mechanical headroom. All right, let's get to some comparisons. So I'm going to rank most heavy-duty engines since the 70s, but what will I rank them by? Torque seems like the best choice at first given the use case, but torque doesn't tell the whole story. You may have one engine with 400 torque and 400 horsepower, then another engine with 405 torque, but only like 300 horsepower. If I were to sort by torque, I'd be missing a lot of nuance there. So I'm going to sort by hork. I know hork probably isn't a thing, but let's just say it is. Let's say hork is horsepower plus torque. It's just a good general measurement of engine output. And personally, I think it makes for an interesting way to compare. So while I'm showing you the numbers here, just remember that the performance numbers are generally just what the engine came out with. Each engine varied in output over time. So don't kill me on the details here. It's close enough and doesn't have to be perfect to get my point across. So, all right, here we go. Let's start with the mighty 460. That's got 554 hork. That's 212 horsepower and 342 foot-pounds of torque. Next is the 390, probably what's in the red truck up there. That's got 575 hork. The fuel-injected 460 is next with 620. Nice bump in the numbers from the carbureted version. And here comes the 6.8 V10. Lots of torque, not much horsepower. 715 hork on this one, but it's quite a bump from the fuel-injected 460. Next is the big Dodge 8-liter Magnum V10. That's a big jump to 750. Again, really big torque, but only about 300 horsepower. Next on the list is the last Ford base engine, the 6.2, gets in there at 790. So a big jump in horsepower on this one, both horsepower and torque right around the 400 mark. Next, we have GM's 8.1 liter 496. That comes in at 795, surpassing the 6.2 by just a bit. And this one was released back in 2001. Next, we have Ram's current 6.4, jumping all the way to 839. Plenty of horsepower and torque with that one. And now we get to the new 6.8, bringing us to, I think, a very respectable 850 hork. That's 20% more than the V10 6.8 and almost 50% more than the 460 Dad had in his camper special back in the day. Next is GM 6.6. This is a solid engine, ekes out about 2% more torque than the 6.8. But keep in mind, the Ford is aluminum body and the GM is steel, so the power to weight ratio may look different. And remember, this is the best HD gasser that GM has to offer, and we're neck and neck with it with the 6.8. Now, without the 7.3, this looks pretty normal, right? There's the big three truck makers battling neck and neck. And then you've got Godzilla there doing the Kool-Aid Man. And there's no denying the 7.3 reigns supreme. But what happens when you take one of the last great gas V8s designed for reliability and you back it off and ask just a little bit less from it? In fact, look, here are almost all gas engines in full-size trucks right now, sorted by Hork displacement ratio, which is just a measure of how hard the engine works per cubic inch of displacement. So look at the high output Hurricane up there. It's 183 cubic inches, but puts out more horsepower and torque than everything else, including the heavy-duty engines. That Ram has to be a lot of fun, but what's interesting is look at the bottom 5 engines. What do they have in common? They're all cast iron blocks with low torque to displacement ratios. They're asking the least out of their displacement, and they're all heavy duty pickup engines. The contrast between a working engine and a performance engine is really apparent here. And at the very bottom is the Godzilla family with almost identical ratios because they're almost identical engines. But the 6.8 asks less work out of the same block heads and cooling. So do you see what I'm saying? I mean, how long do you think this engine will last if it's well maintained? The 6.8 is an incredibly good engine, which is dumped on by Ford's marketing to promote the upcharge. By the way, shout out to that 5.7 Hemi up there with its iron block and reasonable ratio. By this measure, the 5.7 Hemi is the workiest engine out of all the half tons. Never mind the whole lifter thing, but that just goes to show what the EPA regulations can do to an otherwise good engine. Okay, let's talk about why the 6.8 can make sense. First, it's a strong engine with a lot of headroom. We spent a lot of time talking about that, but it's common practice to detune an engine in commercial applications. They do that with chassis cabs now, and even with the 7.3 Power Stroke back in the day, they dialed back the output in applications like school buses and box trucks. They do it for efficiency and reliability. Like I was saying earlier, the 6.8 is effectively a detuned Godzilla. It's overbuilt for its output, but it's not a painful detune. The pedal never feels lacking. I've never felt like I don't have enough power when I need it. It's always felt like plenty. Getty's Garage did a great video on the durability of the Godzilla design. I'll link it in the description. I highly recommend checking it out. So this isn't a new platform. The 7.3's been around for a while. Lessons learned from the 7.3 would be incorporated into the 6.8. The only major issue for the 7.3 that I'm aware of has been low oil pressure idle, and it's mostly in those chassis cab configurations. They want really efficiently idling engines in this configuration, and one of the knobs they have to eke out efficiency is the variable oil pump. So they turned it down, and a little too much. Healthy idle oil pressure is around 20. These, I think, were in the single digits and paid the price. So they've had time to address this and certainly didn't repeat the mistake with the 6.8. In fact, I'll show you. Check it out. I looked at this a few times with Forescan, and every time with the engine warmed up, it's well over 30 psi. It does jump around a bit, but while I watched, it didn't drop below 30. So if you have a use case that requires a lot of idling, it's a good choice. It looks like they overcompensated, and that's great. I'd love to know if a current Model 7.3 reads around the same place. Also, if it's interesting, I captured the fuel rate. It uses around 0.82 gallons an hour with the AC on for what it's worth. It gets surprisingly good mileage if you don't have the off-road package and use the original front air dam. That thing makes a big difference. The computer lies a bit, like a lot of them these days, but it worked out to be right about 19 miles a gallon in the end. And this is with the cruise on 70 on a 103-degree day with 5 grown people in the truck and tools and everyone's crap in the bed. And this is the first time I've ever needed max AC to keep a cool enough interior. On a nice day with just me, I can get 20 on the computer with the cruise set at 70. Not too far off what I got with my power boost on the freeway. In town though, yeah, it's thirsty. Around 14 on average, maybe with civilized driving. But a road trip with the thing, you're just about on par with an F-150. Next, it powers over pine cones. My son set up an experiment and found that it could indeed crush a lot of pine cones. He's got video evidence somewhere, but his iPad is all sticky and yeah. But I think it's a great weekend warrior spec. My wife drives a Maverick, and this is my daily. I have a camper we bring all over the place on weekends, and it does great. No, it's not a power stroke. It doesn't wave its magic antenna around and teleport loads to the top of the mountain. It actually has to put in some work, but like I've hopefully demonstrated, it's designed to put work in. As long as you're up on your maintenance, you can go flat out with it if you want to. I mean, you're not going to hurt it. I enjoy towing with it. It's hard to explain, but it's happy under load. My old 7.3 diesel was the same way. That one made a racket at idle, but under load, it smoothed out. Work engines have character, and you have to work them to find the character. The 6.8 likes being worked, and you can do that worry-free. Also, it's a minor thing, but you can hear the difference from the 7.3. I had the 7.3 on loan for a few days before the 6.8, and the difference was notable. No pun intended. The 6.8 exhaust is kind of, I guess I would describe it as punchy, especially under load. You have to hear it to know what I mean, but personally, I kind of like the way it sounds. I'm thinking about doing some exhaust work and bringing that out a little bit. So why would you choose the 7.3 instead? So if you just want the extra power, it is the biggest engine on the block, and we're all big kids, and that's pretty cool. And that honestly, that's enough to justify the upgrade. If you need the extra power, that's also enough to justify the upgrade. Though I might argue that if the jump to the 7.3 enables you to do something that you couldn't do with the 6.8, you probably need a diesel. The weight rating of your trailer requires that you use a 7.3. Remember, they have a pretty low cap on the towing capacities on the 6.8. And if you're towing more than that and you don't want a diesel, then that justifies the upgrade. There are cases where you're towing all day long, like a landscaping company. You don't want to deal with extra stuff that goes with the diesel. You just want a big gasser to move stuff around all day. Good 7.3 use case. But why not a diesel? Okay, that's a whole different conversation. I might not be as anti-diesel as you think, but I've got a lot to say about all that. Okay, let's wrap this up. I like the 6.8, if you can't tell. Nobody talks about it. The 7.3 has all the spotlight, and that's because the marketing was brilliant. They gave us the 6.8 and then threw it under the bus to market the 7.3 as premium option. But because they want to do it cheaply, they still share most of the same components. It costs Ford nearly the same for both engines. They're just effectively selling a single-digit performance increase and some misconceptions about the internals. So if you're watching this video, especially this far in, I'd be shocked if you haven't heard of the Fast Lane truck on YouTube. They do the world's toughest towing test, and I'd love to see the 6.8 put through its paces. Just don't use the XL off-road package. It won't get the mileage. But anyway, I'll link them in the description if by some glitch in the matrix you haven't seen them. It's a great channel. So I'm totally cool with constructive criticism. I threw out a lot in this video, and I'm pretty positive that people would disagree with me in places. So if I get comments, I'll definitely read them. And I don't mind at all. I like to learn. So as far as future ideas, if there's some interest, I could do something on gas versus diesel, or I could do something on the 10R100 transmission. I could also do something on the hybrid Maverick, or maybe I just chalk this up to remember that time I tried YouTube. Also, does anyone have any solid information about specific parts differences between the 10R100 and the 10R80? If so, reach out. I have some gaps to fill, and there's not a lot of info out there on the 10R100 yet. So anyway, that's it. Thanks for watching. I hope somebody out there found at least part of this interesting. Have a great day.